Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Expert session, where we'll talk about the science of engagement, personalizing customer experience with behavioral science and data-driven insight. My name is Asrar, and I'll be the host for the session. I'm myself from the Microsoft for Startups team, leading the business development and sales engagements with our startups. Joining me today is our esteemed guest, Corey Scobie, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Symend. Corey, why don't you start with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Azra, and thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. So as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Symend. I'm actually relatively new to the organization. I just joined the company in January, but Symend's been doing some pretty amazing things for the past several years. We've been building a platform that I'm eager to share some details about around behavioral science and analytics and how that correlates to customer engagement.
Great, thank you. And as we deep dive into the session, I also want to let everyone know about the Microsoft Code of Conduct. Essentially, we want to provide a safe and sound and healthy environment for all of the participants. So we really appreciate if you can go back to the previous slide where we can actually show the Microsoft Code of Conduct and let the audience go over it for a quick second. So really, at the end of the day, Microsoft does not really tolerate any harassment or discrimination. We want audience to, like I said, we want everyone to have a safe and respectful and engagement throughout the session. And if you have a question, please type it in the IM window that you can see on the right side of the screen. And if there's a question that the audience really likes, please hit the like, and our moderators will surface that question over to us. So with that, I guess let's go ahead and get started. So Corey, why don't you tell us a little bit about Symend and provide a brief overview about what you do and how you're helping the customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. So Symend is a technology company, and really we're focused on helping other companies maintain better relationships with their customers. Often customers fall either into a category of not being in good standing with relationship to their financial profile with their vendors, right? We're talking about like telcos and utilities and that kind of thing, or they may otherwise be financially at risk for other reasons. And so really what we're doing is we're combining behavioral science and computer science to analyze and automate customer engagements and to help nurture those customers back to health. So at the end of the day, what Symend as a company does is that we operate a SaaS platform for engagement and analytics that supports this kind of automated engagement with customers on behalf of, mostly larger, but also mid-sized companies that have some kind of a month-over-month or week-over-week financial relationship with their clients.
That's really great to hear. By the way, I also want to congratulate you on raising Series B extension recently. Can you talk to us a little bit briefly, just so the audience is aware, a little bit about your journey so far, especially pre-pandemic, as we went into the pandemic, and the explosive growth that you have seen and you're on the trajectory to continue seeing in the space?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting couple of years for Symend. The company was actually founded about 4 years ago by a pair of co-founders who really believe in the mission of using behavioral science and human empathy to help engage customers and build better relationships between customers and companies. And the past couple of years have been like a very steep growth curve for us. So as you mentioned, we signed a Series B extension at the beginning of this year, which was an extension to the original Series B that we did just 9 months ago. So in the last 12 months, the company has actually raised over $100 million in venture capital in order to fuel this. And we're seeing just tremendous amount of market demand on the other side. So we're engaged with some of the largest telcos in North America, with some of the largest financial institutions, and our customer base is growing very rapidly. And Symend as a company has more than quadrupled in size in the past 12 months as well. So
that's incredible, and we are aware of all the specific industry like telcos being just one of the many examples where you're seeing significant growth. I want to touch a little bit about the platform architecture. Now we know one of the strategic partners of the Microsoft for Startups program. And the program is really focused on the technology as well as the sales and enablement. Now, since the audience is very technical in nature, I want to deep dive a little bit about on the technology side. Can you talk a little bit about your platform architecture and how Symend uniquely tackles the customer problem in this unique space? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So we are, in fact, a heavy user of Azure cloud services, public cloud services, across a wide array of different services available on the Azure platform. We chose Azure and the cloud because as a hyperscale company, we're looking for the reliability and the growth and the scale that comes with being a Microsoft customer. Fundamentally, at its foundation, what Symend does is we take information from our customers, from the companies that have a relationship with clients. We take records about what state people are in, and if there are people that are at risk or delinquent from their current bills, and we take large amounts of that information into the platform to help build a behavioral profile for individual users, and then to automate the engagement of outreach to them. And in many cases, outreach are through channels such as SMS or email automation, etc., and giving customers options. So if you look at the foundation of what we're using, we have a huge data ingest service, which is largely built on ADF today, which is Azure Data Factory. We are a heavy user of SQL Server across the various different RDBMS facets of our platform. We're heavily into Azure Functions as well. So a lot of our processing or calculation is done at scale across a service bus with Azure Functions. We use Azure Web Apps to deploy landing pages, which are the calls to action that our customers receive as part of the output. And we're also working with some Microsoft partners as well. So we're working with Snowflake on Azure as an example for data lake services and analytics, etc. So
that's really amazing. Thank you for sharing that. You gave us a lot more on the Azure side. Really want to pivot for a second towards the startup side, and you being a CTO of a growing company. As a CTO, what would your advice be to other startups who are in the process of making this technology decision, which is one of the most important decisions that a startup would be making, or a company in general?
Yeah, so it's interesting as you go through the different phases of building a company. You typically go through a series of phases that happen fairly quickly. So there's I have an idea about some technology that would help the world, and I need to prove that idea is valid phase, in which case you write a little software to do it and you see how it kind of works out. And if you get traction with that, you very quickly move into the phase that I think Symend and a lot of other companies are, which is the growth phase of that. And at the growth phase, there's some really seminal decisions to make about the platform technology you choose to use and how scalable and reliable that can be over time. And my advice to CTOs, and to CEOs for that matter, if I'm giving free advice, would be build for the scale that you envision the business is going to be in the future, and don't take shortcuts in the short term. And so, our use, for example, of Azure Functions is because we envision growing from where we're at today, which is millions of transactions, to potentially hundreds of millions or even billions of transactions a month on the platform. And so we're always building for sort of the next phase of growth in how we are constructing the solution on top of Azure. And the reason that that's so important is because if you do get the right formula and you do hit the right mark and you are a hypergrowth company, there's never any time to go back and fix it later on. You always are moving forward. And so my advice is, be pragmatic, but think big in terms of how you're thinking about the scale of your solution when you're picking cloud providers and when you're selecting technologies associated with that.
Absolutely. I just want to pivot real quick, since you're built on Azure 100%. want to understand what are some of the benefits that Microsoft has been able to provide from an Azure standpoint, from an engineering and technology standpoint, that you would like the audience to sort of think about and take away as they're engaging on that or thinking about or making that technology decision?
Yeah, so ultimately, part of the reason that we chose Azure as a platform is because it aligned well with the skill set that we had at Symend, and it was well-known technologies within the space. As we think about each evolution of our platform, we're sort of thinking about all of the various different facets that are going to trip us up. As a company who brokers in other companies' customer information, security is at the top of our mind, right?
Absolutely.
As a company who is required to take in large amounts of data, process it on a very tight schedule on a daily basis to be able to pull and manage that kind of a data turnover, scalability is on our mind. And so, when you add all of those things up, I think our relationship with Microsoft has been definitely a fruitful one. Microsoft has been great in bringing resources to bear to help us understand best practices and patterns and implementation patterns that would make sense for us. And so my team engages with Microsoft technology team on a regular basis to gut check our assumptions about how we are implementing the technology. And also there's, inevitably it's software development, so it doesn't always go perfectly. And so whenever we have an issue and we are unable to find a root cause ourselves, we call in our Microsoft partners, and together we can always find our way to the solution. So
absolutely, thank you for that, Corey. Talking about software development, I think one of the most important things is technology is the fuel for infrastructure. It basically provides that underlying cover, but that's something that's really important. And I think this is where Symend has done a phenomenal job, is especially being in the customer engagement and customer experience space, is empathy. Can you talk a little bit about the empathetic approach you're taking towards delivering these high quality customer experience, starting from software development all the way to that end customer?
Yeah. So one of the things that we found early on in the development of Symend was that customers felt were engaged when they felt that like they had options. And so part of the whole modality of the behavioral science that we bring to bear is to try and make customers feel empowered to be able to make decisions on their own about their own outcomes. And so, what we've been doing from a software development perspective is building more and more modularity into the system that allows a client, a telco or a utility or a bank, to be able to select and create more and more paths that more closely match to the individual profile of their customers. And then through analytics and deep learning, and even some AI and ML types of things, like we use NLP, for example. We use natural language processing to gauge what the customer satisfaction score or a customer satisfaction feeling is around the engagement of a customer when we go through the various different reach outs and engagements. And then from there, we can use that to tune specifically to a customer. So really it's all, the convergence of the computer science and the empathy part of it is that we can use, anchoring off of empathy, we can use computer science to create more customized experiences for customers, and that leads to empowerment, and that leads to a feeling of loyalty between the customers and their clients and their vendor companies, their partners.
That's really helpful, and at the end of the day, it's all data driven. I want to take a quick pivot here because of the question that we came from the audience. So the question is, as a product manager, we need to make data-driven decisions based on customer behavior, which makes sense. Now, Corey, in your experience, have you ever found yourself in a role where there was little to very minimal data due to the nature of the business? Let's say dealing with government, for example. If so, how would you then go about creating a data lake? for such scenario?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's definitely places where we're, even in our scenario, we have blind spots about our customers, and some of it has to do with privacy and the reality of sort of privacy in the digital age, right? Which is that as an individual customer, I may know things about you for a period of time, like your name and your address and your telephone number, but you have to be responsible in how you use that. So when it comes down to data and analytics on the other end of the process, what we're really doing is trying to find patterns and to build an analytics platform and a data lake that allows us to identify not specifics about an individual, but the patterns that come from a certain set of demographic or geographic markers, for example, and that can potentially help us subsegment and qualify and treat customers in different ways. So I guess my advice to the asker is you use what data you have, and then if you can accumulate, even if it's a small set of data points, if you can accumulate enough time series of that data, it's possible to use that to identify pattern recognition and or leverage things like machine learning that can identify pattern recognition that we as humans maybe wouldn't recognize in a normal way.
That's very helpful. Thank you for that. I want to also come back to all the exciting stuff that Symend is working on. Before we talk about that, I want to understand from your perspective, being a CTO, you've seen a lot of success in some industries, like telecom being one of them. Can you briefly talk about your industry approach and really, from an industry standpoint, give the audience a sneak peek as to the industries where Symend has seen significant growth and the industries that you're thinking of expanding in?
Yeah, for sure. So the original set of customers for Symend was in fact from the telco market here in North America. But what we've found is that the idea of using behavioral analytics in customer and automating customer engagement is actually applicable across many, many different industries. So the kinds of industries that we typically see are industries where there's a customer company relationship where they're extending credit in some way, shape, or form. And when we say extending credit, it sounds a little weird because that sounds like a credit card or a loan from a bank. But when you're, for example, when your cable internet provider allows you to use their service for a month before you have to pay for it, that is in fact extending credit. So sort of the hallmark is companies that have some kind of a recurring financial relationship with their customers and are managing that relationship over time. And then ultimately, we can use the kinds of technologies that we've created in the behavioral science platform and the automated digital outreach platform in order to manage those relationships. So we see ourselves expanding in many different vectors across industries. So financial services, utilities, the banking industry in particular. Like more and more of the subscription economy is driving towards a credit-oriented approach and a recurring revenue kind of approach. And so as more of our services as a daily consumer come into that play, Symend has an opportunity to expand across that. And then we also see ourselves expanding vertically as well. So we have been focused primarily on customers, on helping companies manage customers that go into what we call delinquency, or financial risk. So a period where they're behind, but they haven't actually cut off service and they're still managing a relationship with their customers. We also see an opportunity to help in that post-delinquency scenario where a customer just cannot pay their bill and really they need to move into some kind of a collections modality. And so that has historically been a pretty inhumane kind of industry, and we think we can bring some empathy and some digital automation into that. And then there's also the managing the customer relationship pre-delinquency as well, which is, who doesn't want to have a great relationship with their customers regardless of what their financial status is. And so we think that the basics of the behavioral analytics and engagement platform that we're building also gives us the opportunity to expand earlier into the customer lifecycle as well.
Absolutely, that's really helpful. One thing that came to my mind as you were talking about all these different things, especially the touch point, is the face of a brand or these specific touch points where COVID happened and sometimes life takes turn for the worse. But what's really important, working through Symend, brands are able to provide that differentiated experience through those touch points that are data driven, number one, but more importantly that are customized to that specific user and really very well curtailed to their specific scenario, sort of providing that very unique and customized experiences that brands wish for. So that's really great to hear. Another question we have from the audience sort of on that industry pivot is around managing risk. So by investing in technology at scale of quote unquote, where I want my business to be rather than where it is, isn't this a particularly big risk at present, given the current pandemic market and the sort of unknown situations that are affecting many different industries? So I think what my interpretation is, how do you sort of balance that risk and sort of that unknown as Symend is thinking about a specific industry?
Yeah, I think that's really where the power of the modern cloud-driven environment really comes to play, which is that I can have my software development team write a web scale, horizontally scalable implementation on top of Azure services, and then I can scale the Azure services as needed. So I don't have to put a whole bunch of money up front into the volume that I think I'm going to need in 2023 by building a data center and a bunch and pre-provisioning a bunch of database instances and all that kind of stuff. I can bring it online immediately with an agile DevOps kind of approach. And so I think the risk is more mitigated than it used to be. I think the idea that you can build a billion-dollar company on top of a relatively low capital footprint, but you have the ability to scale beyond that at any point in time is one of the unique things about building a startup in this age versus what it looked like 10 or 15 years ago, which was a completely different thing. I mean, gosh, if we went back in time 10 or 15 years ago, I think there's a tremendous amount of risk to building the kind of scale that you envision for the future as a company. I'd be building data centers and trying to understand how I'm going to operationalize on a global footprint and all that kind of stuff. And boy, it's just such a different world these days.
Absolutely. We'll take one last question from the audience before we wrap up here. In your machine learning approach, do your data science teams work offline and develop models or tune features, etc., on local machines with quick iteration, and then essentially another team figures out how to deploy these in production at scale in Azure? Or does your data science team build these models right from the start in a cloud environment itself?
Yeah, so interestingly, the answer is both, right? So we use data science in what I would describe as preceded model sort of algorithmic ways. So NLP is a great example of that, which is that NLP is a real-time service. So every time an email comes back from a customer, we analyze it to figure out what the sentiment is inside of that email. So the service that we operationalize there is one that is actually a real-time service that's bound to our data processing system. However, the model for that is actually built and populated and repopulated offline over time. And similarly, we have other scenarios where we are building largely online and taking in real-time data. So like our customer segmentation sort of modality, we think about that as more of a real-time, because we're funneling data off our mainline data processing through the models on a regular basis. So we're building that kind of stuff in the cloud directly.
Absolutely, that's really helpful. I think I'd made this comment early on, but I wanted to also come back to this about what's next for Symend. So as a CTO, I mean, obviously you have insight into all the exciting innovation that we should expect from Symend. Can you give the audience a sneak peek, sort of what's coming next here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are continuing to expand our footprint of outreach. So as we grow globally as a company, different channels become more relevant in different geographies. I'll give you an example here in North America. It's pretty standard fare to use SMS to communicate with end customer users. In different parts of the world, it's primarily WeChat, or it's primarily, different channels across different sort of global things. So we continue to expand our platform from a channels of outreach perspective. We're doing a lot of work with, again, with data science and AI and ML to try and figure out how we can fine tune the very specific experience that customers are having in engagement pipelines. And yeah, and just a lot of scale and growth. I think, we've got some big sort of plans under the covers architecturally that won't mean much to the world from a public facing perspective, but is part of our building the next generation SaaS platform that's going to be the definitive platform of customer engagement in this space.
Absolutely. I also want to let the audience know that you can learn more about Symend by visiting www.symend.com, and Symend also has a solution on Azure Marketplace. We also have some contact information for Symend if you're interested in contacting the team and learning more, or running a pilot, which we have seen a lot of enterprise customers as well as small companies work with and or deploy. And then essentially, please follow Symend on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, Corey, coming back to you here. In closing, can you please tell us what can a business expect to achieve as a result of partnering with Symend? Something that the audience should take away.
Yeah, I think really it gets back to what we were talking about with empathy and the customer relationship before, which is that when you partner with Symend and you use our automation platform, what you get at the other end is you get first, you get really two effects. One is that we help companies manage and recover more of their customer revenue than they would otherwise, right? So there's a very hard dollar value to that, which is if a certain percentage of your customers are going to go delinquent over time, the faster you can heal them and the more that you can heal that relationship, the more financially beneficial it is. But I think the real long-term value is that customers that go through and experience an event like that, where they're in some series of delinquency, whether it's through extenuating circumstances or just by accident, but experience a really high-end customer engagement relationship, become incredibly loyal customers downstream, and we have a tremendous amount of data to show that. So I think the real value is just building the loyalty with your customer base. We know how hard it is to obtain customers in any market segment in this world, and so keeping the ones that you have and making them happy and loyal, I think is really, really important.
Absolutely, and then that directly ties to providing that brand experience, that initial promise that that you made to all the customers that you have. So, thank you so very much, Corey, for being here and answering all the questions. This has been a phenomenal session, and the engagement from the audience has been really awesome. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and being at Microsoft Ignite with us. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of Ignite. Thanks again.
Thank you.